All right, so for our first lesson, we're going to be using the app Procreate, and we're going to be using it on an iPad with an iPad pencil. And this is the basics of drawing, first class. So we'll open up a untitled artwork, blank artwork. The pen I'm using is Drawing Light Pine. I think we just use a basic one. Don't mess with any of that stuff until we get a little bit more comfortable. The color I'm using is black. You could use any color, but for this I'm just going to use black. And the foundation of drawing is lines and shapes, so that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So whether you're doing this on an iPad or on a piece of paper, learning to draw, the main thing we're going to do here is just draw some lines. And it might seem pretty simple, but it's important to get this down. And we're going to be doing different texture, different pressure, and just see how the lines respond. So we're going to do a bunch of vertical lines. Just going down, trying to keep them evenly spaced. And they don't have to be perfect, but you can see how this one's darker as I'm pushing harder on the iPad, and this is lighter. I think that gives like a little bit different touch. So as you're experimenting with drawing, you want to make sure you get these things, get this feel of the light, and then again, here's the dark. And I really like the iPad. I feel like it responds really well, similar to actual pencil. And now we'll do some horizontal lines. And they don't have to be perfectly straight, but you're just kind of practicing getting your lines going here. And if you did want to be straight on the iPad, I think you could do a line and then you hold it somehow. Let me see. I don't know, it's supposed to snap and make it straight, but I'm struggling to do that. But anyways, just kind of mess around, make some lines. You could experiment making this. This is what makes the line a little bit thinner. So we have some thinner lines. We'll do some diagonal lines. Cross them this way. And again, you're just getting a point. The point of this lesson is just to get a feel of how you're not trying to make anything. You're just trying to mess around with different lines. And then sometimes, like here, we can go back and do vertical lines over this. Nice and straight. You might be thinking, oh, this is so simple. And it is simple, but it's just getting familiar with your tools. And I think that's an important piece of what we're trying to do with drawing. You can also do, lines are also wiggly. You could start making crazy shapes and getting a feel for these lines. But lines are the foundation of drawing, and drawing is the foundation of painting and any other kind of art that you want to do as far as drawing and painting goes. Kind of cross them up. So you're just practicing the spacing. Try to do some a little bit more straight. So this first exercise is just getting familiar with lines, and I like to think of it as not being afraid to just mess around, because some people are like, oh man, my lines aren't perfectly straight. Like, they don't have to be. It's just getting used to the feeling of your tools. Okay, so that's the first lesson. It's pretty basic. Just get a feel for the lines. And then now I'm going to create a new layer here, and we'll close that one, but we'll work on this one. Now we're going to be working on shapes. In addition to lines, you use lines to make shapes. So circles, triangles, squares. It might seem like we're in kindergarten again, but this is essential. And if we don't get this part right, we don't start with seeing things as shapes, we're going to miss out, and our drawing's going to suffer. So circles, they don't have to be perfect. Those are actually pretty good. But, just get a feel for drawing and draw both ways. And this way on the iPad, let me try to do it. Why is it not working? I don't know. There's a way to make it so it snaps a circle if you want it perfectly circled, but it's not working right now. So again, just practicing these circles. Go both ways. And if I was not making this video, I'd hold the iPad a little bit differently. So when you're doing it yourself, you want to make sure you're comfortable while you're doing it. I think that's an important piece of this. And also on the iPad, when you're drawing these things, if you want them to disappear, you can double tap with 2 fingers and they go away. And then if you use 3 fingers, you can pop back. So it just takes away the stroke. So that's kind of cool. One of the things I want to show you with these shapes are, like, these circles look pretty basic, but if I were to actually start drawing a circle, this is how I would go about it. I would just start almost drawing straight lines and just build a circle kind of gradually. And so you don't have to worry about doing it in one line, and then see how you kind of clean it up as you go. And then as we get into drawing, you can see how these lines will make way for, shape your circle better. Okay, so this is part of the circle. One thing I like doing too when we start thinking about shapes is these are flat, but you got to start also visualizing them as kind of spheres. Like this simple idea of like a sphere, a 3-dimensional shape. This is going to be key for what we're doing in drawing, because if we're doing a representational drawing, you're trying to make it look 3D, you're trying to make it look real, and making something that's 2D into 3D as far as how it looks is a way to do that. Okay, so we've done, I'm going to start a new layer here. We've done that. The next layer, the next shape are squares. Practice these. Again, these are not amazing squares, I understand that. But again, this is just getting a feel for the medium. And again, if I was actually drawing a square, I would draw it more like this, kind of lightly sketch. Kind of get the gist of it in there. And then in a sketching, that's how I go about drawing a square. I very rarely just go, square. I think that's key. And then you can build off this. Again, remember to see it in 3D. Get the cube going. And then you just visualize these lines going back here and up like that. So you kind of have your box. And then you can, once you're drawing, then you build these out with a little bit darker lines and reinforce, what you're trying to do. And you build, I like to think of drawing as building, building up from steps. So there you get the shape with that. Next shape we're going to work on is triangle. Just get a feel for it. Sometimes you could put your hand on the iPad. Sometimes it kind of hovers above. Figure out what works for you. Again, part of the hope with this drawing also is just to kind of free you up a little bit, to don't feel like you have to make perfect triangles every time. But that you just enjoy the process. You have fun. You get to learn how the tools work. Because very rarely, when you're trying to draw something, are they perfect triangles or perfect circles? And so you just use these as tools and building blocks. And again, you see the point here, triangles, shapes. But if I were to draw take my time, kind of sketch out a triangle, I would do it more like this. And then if you want to make it into a cone or a pyramid, you kind of begin to visualize it in 3D space. And in the future, we'll have lessons that highlight perspective, but essentially perspective is how do you see something that's 2D and 3D space. Again, let's just do a quick recap. So just this week for the assignments, just practice drawing, squiggly lines. You're not trying to create any art, you're just trying to practice. And so practice by doing lines, you can kind of hatch them, We'll get in more detail with this later, but it's called cross hatching, where you just kind of go over and then you go over this. It's a way of shading. But practice making these lines both straight, horizontally, diagonally, with different pressure. If you want it dark, remember, push hard. If you want it soft, which I recommend to start, it's just a light touch. I didn't change any color. I didn't change any thickness. This is just how the responsiveness of the iPad. This is super light, and this is if I'm pressing like a maniac. So you can see how there's a lot of versatility there, which I think is good. The other things to work on, drawing circles, and remember to think about them as spheres. Oh, that's bad. But a three-dimensional space. We talked about squares, seeing them as cubes as well. Beginning the process of perspective, triangle, and rectangle, as I'm assuming you all know, is just a fancy square. You can think about rectangles like this, like a box laying down, or if you do it this way, this is how you get like your idea of a building. You could put little windows on it, etc., a door. And as you can see, when I'm drawing, I'm kind of thinking and I'm practicing on how I see things. I'm not as concerned at this point about the finished product because I'm explaining, building a foundation. But these things are what build up the world around us. And so if we begin to see things as shapes and how to translate those shapes into a drawing, I think it'll be beneficial. One other quick thing, if you want, this thing over here on the slider, it just makes the pencil thicker, so you can get really thick brush strokes. And I encourage you to try this out a little bit. But for the sake of learning to draw, this is at 10. I think that's a good like if you can get it thick, but it's also pretty thin. So I'd recommend just using, as you're learning to draw, just use one color, black. You don't need to mess with this is the opacity. If you put it down, you have to push really hard to make it even see. I wouldn't worry about that. And in the future, we'll go into painting and brushes and all that stuff. I wouldn't worry about the eraser. That's what this is. You can erase things, but as I said, if you need to, you can just tap like that. But again, I wouldn't stress out about that with these lessons. But I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for taking the time to do this, and we'll have more lessons to follow. See ya.